Hello and welcome to Vikings and Muses. We're going to just kind of jump right into things today because our conversation before we hit record was actually going. And just to kind of catch up everyone who is not privy to the unrecorded section of this, I was saying I have a lot of frustrations right now at my job. And, for those of you who don't know, I'm a corporate auditor. So my job is I go in and I try to improve processes, and I'm hired by the board of directors. So I don't actually report through the CEO to safeguard the investor assets. And so a big part of my job is working with procurement systems and saying like, hey, like, are we actually doing a good job? And we're trying to upgrade a procurement system, and it's driving me up the wall because I just get excuse after excuse after excuse, and like part of my whole like ethos, like part of my core of who I am is like, if we all agree that the system sucks and doesn't serve us, let's dismantle it and build something new. And you always get these people who are like, like, well, no, well, there's costs or that's not feasible or whatever. And I'm like, if the current system sucks and does not serve us, anything else could be an improvement. Like literally anything else. And the cost is always the thing. People are always like, oh, well, we couldn't create a human-centric society with walkable neighborhoods and public transit because it would cost a lot of money. Have you ever seen how much money we spend on roads?
Mm.
Like for fractions on the dollar, we could create an entire public transit system and high-speed rail network in this country for literally half of what we spend on the highway system. Like that's not an excuse. The money's not the excuse, and like people hate me for this, and I get it. Like
Mm.
I'm kind of an asshole with this, but like I can't not do it. I can't not be me.
I am so loving this conversation. And what I was saying right before you press record is this is exactly why people don't like authentic masculinity. Because real masculinity is all about what is and what isn't, as opposed to like how we're going to sugarcoat this corporate moment of a conversation around this big table, which is like what bothers me so much. Like, so I work in marketing. There's so much fluffy language around everything and it's always so annoying for me, and I just really resonate like with um this like real masculine drive to change and make things better and to like use data and to speak what is and what isn't. And I was saying somebody that does this in a way is also Conor McGregor. And a lot of people don't like him and he's an asshole or whatever, but I think that this like just unabashed, unfiltered like devotion to what is true and what isn't true, where it counts, who's the winner, where's the money, what are we doing, like this devotion to those answers is masculinity. And sometimes, yeah, it can come off a little brass, right? Brash, is that the word? Brash,
Brash,
brash.
brash, but it requires some brass, right? Like I
This
mean,
is my
like
English second language coming out. Love it.
totally. Well, but I mean, like Conor McGregor, man's balls are made of brass, and everyone like I personally think he's an asshole, but like I can still respect him, right? Like
Right,
because
right.
what's the difference between conceit and confidence? It's whether or not you can back it up. So if he's
Yes,
conceited and says I'm going to go in the ring and just dominate, and then he backs it up, that wasn't conceit. He was just stating facts.
totally.
And I find myself in this situation a lot where I'm just like, people are like, well, there's no other way we could do this. Okay, well, X, Y, and Z. Why does this not go? And they're
Right.
like, well, because it will cost more money. Right now, we're blowing nine figures out the door. So my solutions would cost seven figures to implement versus your nine figures of inefficiency. I fail to understand why we're continuing to have this conversation.
So let me ask you this. If you were to have the intuitive hit from Mother Earth, the divine, what would be the reason these people are not on board? Like, what is the reason?
Oh, how do I say this without coming off as really judgmental? Um, like it's fear.
Yeah,
It really
yeah.
it's fear. Like to me it's two things. Like the I've seen this throughout my entire career. Like this was true at the schools I used to work at all the time, right? Constant chaos, death by committee, nobody wants to change anything. Because leadership doesn't have your back.
Mm.
Like if they're asking us to gamble with billions of dollars, and that's not an exaggeration. Um, and if leadership doesn't have your back, like, do you have permission to make a mistake? Because if you don't, they're not going to do it. Like, because the current state sucks, but at least we all know it sucks, so I'm not held accountable for ways it could suck in different ways. But if
Totally.
you have leadership so like we want to fix this, you're going to have to take a risk. And it's just like like I think about my girls, where like I come home and there's a hot iron on the floor and there's a hole in the carpet now. Like I have a choice as a parent. I can punish them, which then would then signal to them it's not okay to make mistakes, it's not okay to make
Totally.
risks, and that if you do and I catch you, you're in trouble.
Yes.
Versus, oh, I did this. Me as the leader of my household have encouraged my girls to be, self-starting, to be to
Yeah.
be instinctual, to like solve problems and do the next best thing. And the next best thing was, well, Papa was busy at work and I wanted to do melty beads, but I know what the process is. I'm a big girl. I got a stool. I can go get the iron. Like I did
Yeah.
that as the leader. I have to take
Yeah.
responsibility. At the corporate level, nobody does that.
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
all the executives have golden parachutes. Like when was the last time you heard of a homeless person who was like the CEO of a Fortune 100 company and they drove it into bankruptcy and now they're homeless? It never happens.
Mm-mm.
The
No, it
risk
never
is never
happens.
borne by them because they shuffle it off on everyone else.
Mm. That
I don't know. I guess
it's
I
interesting.
don't know if I answered your question.
No, it's really good. I knew it was fear, right? Like, why does any sort of control or, like, I don't know, dominance or lack of integrity happen? It's because of fear. And I think fear of, like, not, we've talked about this many times, fear of that, like, foundational pillar of Maslow's hierarchy, fear that you won't eat, fear that you won't be able to survive. And this just made me think of what you were talking about, Chernobyl. Have
Okay.
you
I don't know where
have
we're going with
you
this, but okay.
okay. classic classic Soviet example. Okay, so if you guys haven't seen, there's a great I think it's like a mini series about Chernobyl on, I think it's on HBO. But generally the horror, the blow up, the tragedy that happened in, I think it was 1986, where
Hmm.
the nuclear explosion went down in Chernobyl, and they talk about how there were a couple of different signs before the explosion was going to happen. Like there were a couple of times when the people that were running the show at the moment were like the what were they called? I guess the engineers behind the scenes. They were
Hmm.
seeing like, okay, there's like a red light. I need to go do something, but they were scared to make a change because they were told to do one thing from the very top, and if they told them no, then they were scared that they were going to get fired. So literally because of fear of leadership, they said nothing, and then Chernobyl happened.
Hmm. Did I ever told you what I wrote my crisis management plan when I did my MBA on?
No.
Fukushima.
Oh,
So
fascinating.
like when I wrote that, so I'm gonna just establish credentials here real quick. So when I wrote that, I actually knew the head of investor relations at APS, Arizona Public Service,
Okay.
and they have the largest nuclear power plant in the United States is in Phoenix, Arizona. And
Okay.
so she put me in contact with the chief nuclear officer of the plant, the chief
Okay.
firefighter of the plant, the head of IMPO at the time, International Nuclear Power Operators, and then
Whoa.
they were those two guys, the chief nuclear officer and the guy head of IMPO, were the two guys who headed up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's response to Fukushima. They literally wrote the book on this.
Wow.
So yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because for starters, Chernobyl, the miniseries has a lot of factual errors, but the fear of pointing out the obvious
Hmm.
was not was not one of them.
Yeah.
So like for those of you who don't know, nuclear reactors don't explode like bombs do. What they do is one of the byproducts of nuclear fission is hydrogen. Hydrogen is explosive, and so if it's uncontrolled, the hydrogen builds up, and that's what explodes. So
Right.
like when you think of 3 Mile Island, when they go like, well, they vented, well, that's what they were venting. was hydrogen out of the reactor so it didn't blow up.
Oh,
Right? And
gosh, I
so,
was learning
because,
something from you.
yeah, because the reactor at Chernobyl was a BWR, boiling water reactor. Same at 3 Mile Island. Same at Fukushima.
Mm, mm,
The ones at Palo Verde Nuclear Generation Station are PWRs, pressurized water reactors. But the point being is that there's a question of authority here, right?
totally,
Who has authority to vent?
totally. Wow. Yeah. Um, it's just crazy. I mean, that to me is the epitome of fragile masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the epitome of not masculinity. It's fear. It's just kind of like following orders, trying to seem like you have it together, um, and you don't. And it's
And
so,
not wanting to
yeah,
say what's wrong.
yeah. Totally. That's it. That's literally it. We can literally pinpoint it to that right there. And it's just wild. Like there's just crazy stories too, because actually my family on my mother's side, my grandmother and all of them are from Babruisk, Belarus, which is about 45 minutes away from Chernobyl. And so as a kid, I'm just sharing the story because I think it's fascinating. But as a kid, remember my grandmother's sister ended up staying there, but my grandmother left when she was 18 because she went to university. She ended up getting married and moved to Azerbaijan, which is where I was born. But her sister stayed, and she ended up developing breast cancer later. And
Mm-hmm.
then there were a few other women that were her friends that over the years as a kid growing up, I'm like 11, 13, then I'm 14. I'm like, why does everyone have breast cancer? And it's like, yeah, like the only thing that the Soviets did was like tell them not to pick fresh blueberries that summer. That's
Totally.
literally it. They said nothing else. Everything else was fine. And it's just classic like socialist behavior. So,
Well, I mean, like, it's. I think it's a great example of what happens when you have a country that's stolen technology they don't fully understand and are trying to implement it.
mm,
Like, did the
mm.
Soviets even? Because part of the problem is that they didn't even understand how the reactors worked,
Oh, I didn't know that.
right? Like, so part of what happened there is you need power to shut down a reactor. You need power to start a reactor. Like, they
Yeah.
require inputs.
Yeah.
And so what they were doing is they shut off the turbine and was using the like dead spin, so there's no
Mm,
inputs in there to power the
mm,
pumps. It was part of their emergency procedures. Nobody in their right mind would do this. Like our nuclear power plants all have diesel generators on site to do this, so
mm,
that they don't have to rely on the grid or anyone else,
mm.
right? In fact, the diesel generators being flooded at Fukushima was a big part of that problem. So like that's one part of it. But when you talk about like, classic socialist behavior, like we do this in capitalism too.
Right.
If the
It's
investors
super
don't want to hear
related.
something, yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is it socialist? Is it capitalist? Or is it a byproduct of poor relationships and attachment?
Ooh. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think it all fundamentally comes from the root, which is the fear of just fear, like you said before, like the inability to trust that if you tell the truth, things will work out. Like the truth always wins. Everything will get figured out, and also it's this like um, uh, tit for tat kind of mentality
Mm-hmm.
of just like if I can't assume that there will be enough for everyone, so I have to take care of me and mine, and then I guess like screw you over so that I can be okay. It's definitely like a us or them mentality. I think that happens.
Totally. It just reminds me of something that Gabriel Mate has talked uh,
Mm,
about the idea of the of attachment and authenticity.
okay.
That we give up, we in order to try to attach, we give up our authenticity,
Yep.
and then as a result, we're no longer authentic to ourselves, and we get a
Right.
fake level of attachment because it occurred
Right.
from an inauthentic place. So I think about like what you're talking about with the Soviets, like the attachment is like I want to feel safe from the government, and
Totally.
so I create this Potemkin village to make this um, inauthentic version of myself, so
Oh
that
yeah.
they'll praise me and they'll like me, right?
Yeah.
And then as a result, like when confronted with reality, because reality always bats last and always bats hardest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when confronted with that, you don't want to say that because you don't want to give up the attachment. Because then who am I? Am I
Mm-hmm.
am I safe? I can't be safe. And I think we do this even in a capitalist system of like, we present fraudulent financial reports to just
Yeah.
make sure the investor stays happy. Reality
Right.
keeps up with us, and then we end up laying off our workforce or going bankrupt or anything else like that. We do
Right.
this with parents, we do this with local governments, we do this with businesses. I don't think this is necessarily socialist versus capitalist. I think it's just, human versus anti-human.
This is so good. I think it's one. I think it's so important to talk about this because I was reading a couple of essays. I went into a deep dive. Maybe it was like a year ago. I went into a deep dive of like Soviet masculinities and like what that means and how that is. And the main distinction that really interested me at first was how men were working here in the United States. Like men went off to work, they made the money, they provided and they protected, and the women were at home housewifing and taking care of kids and all of that, generally speaking, before World War II. And in the Soviet Union, it wasn't like that. The women worked step by step, like on par with the men. There was no scenario in which like women didn't go to work. It was very much like from 1917 onward, it was like we are all Soviets, we are all here for the motherland, proletariat, all of that stuff. So all the women that I knew in my family, and then also all of the women that I read about historically, like they were all working. You see women like in the factories in like the 20s and the 30s. So because of this, men and women were technically the same. They were making the same amount of money. Everyone was making the same amount of money. So what do these men have to like hold themselves as bigger, better, the leaders, etc.? So they developed this like ultra fragile masculinity. Like their masculinity became they had to kind of create systems in which they made themselves feel better or feel more powerful, I guess, than the women. So that's something that is just really interesting that I was reading about. Like most women didn't drive. They could, of course, learn to drive, but they didn't because it was just better to let the men only drive. Then there were obviously the women were the ones that were still cooking. The women were the ones still taking care of kids, right? That's not a man's thing to do, especially in the Soviet Union. Like the men, I remember, aren't really even, they were never really even there at the hospital when kids were born. They were just at home. They would just like hear about it or see the kid whenever later, whenever they were available. And I think the reason I'm talking about this is because why am I talking about this? Um, where was I going with this? Because I was just really fascinated in like why here's what it is. Because of the women's, the women were able to maintain this connection to their kids and their family, and this was like something that was fulfilled them and made them feel like, okay, my maternal instincts are here, and like this is the reason I'm alive, even though I have this like factory job just like my husband. The men didn't really have that. So the only thing the men had were this attachment to the state. They were like a cog in a
Mm.
wheel, and they kept being told like, you are literally the only reason you're alive is to like be one of millions to fight for the motherland. And so it's just this complete detachment from individual identity and fulfillment that the women were still able to maintain.
Mm.
So it was just really interesting, which is why you have so many more men that were alcoholics, so many more men that were abusive, so many more men that were just expressing that kind of uh expressing violence in that way because there was a zero authenticity for them in that
Totally.
experience. Yeah.
Now, draw me the line to the statistics for men in the United States today.
The statistics, what statistics?
We account for half of the working age male population is currently unemployed.
Yes.
Half of the male
Yes.
population, it has had more than 5 drinks in the last 4 days.
Yes.
We're currently 80% of deaths of despair.
Yep.
On and on and on.
Yeah.
And what it goes back around to. So what's then the thing? It
Right.
it kind of like how long can you tell somebody that you're as needed as a fish needs a bicycle before they start believing it?
Oh yeah. I mean, barely no time at all. Like
Totally.
it's like you don't What's fascinating is that the opposite is true as well, but we
Explain.
don't do that. Like, okay, great little example. I love Alison Armstrong, OG, queen of understanding differences between men and women. I love her books. But in one of her books, one of her characters, Karen, is like a elementary school teacher. And she sees that this boy, I guess it was like 11, 12 at the time, is not doing well in school. He seems to be really sluggish. He's like, his grades are suffering, all this stuff. And for a couple of months, she was essentially scolding him. Why aren't you doing your work? What's, all that. Why aren't you doing your work? Criticizing him. And then, after starting to understand the teachings of femininity and how to really speak to men in a way that they understand, little boys included, she started to change her note. She started to sing a different song, and she started to say to him, "Hey, you are so good at hanging things up around the classroom. I've seen you do it once before. Can you stay over and help me?" Right? "Hey, you are so great at this," or, "Oh man, I really don't think I can do X without you. Would you help me with that?" This kid, I think 4 days of this went down, and this kid just started doing better. He started sticking around. He started paying more attention. This kid just felt like he was needed for 4 days, and then it got turned around. So that's what I mean by the opposite is true as well.
Totally. It reminds me of Maria Montessori, who created the Montessori method.
Mm-hmm.
So my kids go through Montessori schools.
Okay.
But she had a similar observation where she was like, part of the problem is like she was taking for her, she was taking kids who were considered substandard,
Yeah.
and when she
Yeah.
was like, well, of course they're substandard, like nothing's for them. And so she like created
Mm.
these classrooms that were like kid sized, and like they didn't get sippy cups; they got
Yes.
actual cups, and like
Yes.
they were taught to like clean the desks and sweep. So like
Yes.
my girls, I remember we were eating, and Agatha was like 2, and I took her plate and put it in the dishwasher, and she lost her shit. Um,
Really?
and because that was her job.
Yeah.
So like in that, it's interesting to
Mm.
see the boys in Montessori method, because a lot of times, like my girls, their school goes all the way through high school,
Mm.
and then a lot of boys are taken out and put into traditional high schools, and the stated
Mm.
reason almost all the time is, well, I think they need more discipline. But of course,
Mm.
what's happening at the time, they're hitting puberty, they're starting to become like real high performance engines. Um,
Totally.
and now we're like, well, so here's our solution. We're gonna put them into a factory environment and try to make them do rote things, and that's gonna have a good effect. And my whole thing is like, no, we should double down on the other way, like you're
Totally.
saying, of being like, well, let's grow a garden, like
Yeah.
like let's
Yeah.
let's shear some sheep. Let's start a business. Let's do something like
Yeah.
that, because and
Ugh.
especially, it's not that women can't do that either, but like boys crave that type of thing. They crave direction.
Yeah. They crave direction. It's insane. I just over and over again, I keep realizing how just men in my life, or even like teen boys, like I'm back in Dallas now, so I have like some family friends and their kids around, and so I see just how these boys like light up when they figure something out, or they learn how something works, or like they understand a model that like depicts a complex kind of problem, and I'm just like, oh my god, they care so much about these things. They just want to learn how to master different things that are useful, and they just want to be allowed to do that. And it's just, I don't understand why we don't want to do that for them.
Because when you give a man a mission, if you're not clear on what you define the mission as, you're gonna end up with a weird result, and one you might not like. Like
Really?
that.
Like what?
Oh, totally. um, here's a great example.
Okay.
When we lived in Flagstaff and I was still a teacher, my wife, her main complaint all the time was, the walls are crushing me, everything's caving in, we have no margins, fix
Yeah.
it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm making less than $40,000 a year as a teacher in one of the most
Yeah.
expensive cities in Arizona. I have no health insurance. I'm working 2 extra jobs. I'm on food stamps. Like, this is not mathematically possible. But her demand to me was, fix it.
Yeah.
Give us more margins. And so when I came home, I was like, yeah, I quit my job and I'm going back to school. and I'm going to become the best fucking public accountant in the world. I'm going to go get a job at the Big Four. And then, like 2.5 years later, not only did I get the job at the Big Four, a job everyone told me I couldn't get, right? But I'd also gotten her a job. I'd gotten
Right.
her a job at the company she wanted to work for, doing the things she wanted that she never applied for.
Right.
Because that's how much I like. Okay, good. Like the mission was clear. Give us more
Yeah.
margins. Well, getting her a
Yeah.
job was getting us more margins. So
Totally.
2.5 years later, we're making 3 times as a couple what we were, before,
Yeah.
and she's miserable.
Really?
She's absolutely fucking miserable. Now, part of that has to do with Dylan did a bad job communicating, because I did.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I came in, I was like Bilbo Baggins going, I'm going on an adventure, and out the door we went, right? I didn't explain where we're going, why we're going there, how it's going to be, how her kids are going to be better off. Nothing.
Yeah.
I just told the pregnant woman, because she was pregnant at the time, like, I quit my job and we're going to blow up our lives. Like, that's what she heard. But she also failed to tell me what enough meant like to her. She did not explain to me, like, she wanted more margins so she could continue her academic career. Not that she necessarily wanted to be, forced into the corporate world.
Yeah.
She wasn't ready for that. So it's a great example of, like, I had a clear mission, and I love that. Like, for 2.5 years, like, I look back, like, I describe those years to people, and they're like, that sounds like hell. No, it was the best time of my life because I knew
Totally.
exactly what I was about. I knew
Totally.
exactly what I was to do. And,
Clear
like,
momentum.
exactly, like it was so crystallinely clear,
Yeah.
to what I was supposed to do. But this is the same thing that I'm going through at work right now. Like, the executives were very clear with what they wanted. They want to change the procurement system. They want to, make things better controlled. They don't want to hear, well, we can't do it. We can't change it because that's how we've always done. So now I'm like a Scud missile. They pointed me at that thing. They pushed the button, and now I'm going. And everyone else is like,
Mm.
no, no, no. Like, we have to find a way to subvert this. And I'm like, no.
Mm.
Like,
No, we're doing it.
you told me
Mm.
to conquer the hill. Now you're complaining how I'm doing it. Like,
Totally.
and
Totally.
I've had that my whole career, even
Mm.
when I was a teacher, where it was like, we're gonna go to a block schedule. Okay, aye, Captain. And I created all this stuff, and they're like, 3 days later, oh, we decided to scrap that. And now, why are you upset? Well, because I completely changed everything because of what you told me to do.
I resonate with that. I've spent a lot of time working on this, but I can really attach to I used to really attach to people's words because I would never say anything that I didn't 100% explicitly mean. And like, I think it's like there's some light and dark in every situation, right? So like if I was super intentional about like what I would be saying or not saying, then that meant that I would hesitate more, right? I wouldn't just
Mm-hmm.
say things off the cuff, but then maybe I wouldn't feel as free. And that was so true for me. Like I was so intentional about everything I said. And I expected other people to be that way too. So I would attach to what people said. And then when they changed their mind, I would be devastated. I would
Mm.
just like be devastated. And I realized like it's a little more of a mirror moment. Like it was about looking to myself a little bit and just kind of like not attaching so quickly. And so I know we're talking about work and like very clear marching orders from bosses. So that's a little bit different, but I think sometimes like I think just what that's done for me is it's helped me see just how much over communication I require in my life and not making that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And because I used to be afraid to like, so if like my boss said something, right, and I wasn't sure because I heard something else somewhere else, I would like not want to ask again. But now I'm very much like, hey, I just wanted to confirm. And here's what I'm planning on doing. Is that a good idea or not? And I think I like need that now before I proceed, because I've been burned so many times, like you as well. So
Tell me more about that from your journey in exploring your own feminine, and what
yeah.
how has that changed over time?
Well, um, I just understood that something that is really valuable to me, like for example, someone really honoring their word or being on time, these types of things are really valuable to me because I have a wound around abandonment and rejection and people not doing what they say and like all of that. And so I've been able to work through that and heal that, but that's like a very clear um, wound point to me. And so what I think men and women specifically, now we're getting into like masculine and feminine stuff. I think men and women have a problem and they have the same fights over and over again because
Mm-hmm.
they believe like they're not willing to imagine that somebody else values something completely different from what they value based on their own set of wounds. And this has been a big learning for me. Like, I really need you to be on time, right? Like, that's so important to me.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not. You're not being on time. Like, why? Why? Do you hate me? You don't care about me? You don't love me? You
Mm.
don't, right? All that stuff. But then, meanwhile, I have to point the finger back at myself, and I'm telling a story about a former relationship. So, this is a great one. Meanwhile, I literally I remember my ex would just like stack the dishwasher in this kind of like perfect, like efficient, like military way. And I would just be like, who cares about the stupid dishwasher? And I would always stack it in a ridiculously stupid way. Like, who cares? And I remember thinking, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. And meanwhile, so hurt that he's always late, not realizing that the dishwasher for him is like the late stuff for me. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
completely disregarding like whatever trauma he's got going on in the sense that for him like it was really important to feel it's really important to feel respected and honored in the way that he chooses to do things. He thinks it works better, it makes him feel loved. So like why couldn't I understand how important this dishwasher thing was to him? You know? And I just remember getting that at some point and starting to understand that I had to start telling people why things were important to me from a vulnerable place,
Mm-hmm.
which is really hard to do. It's hard to say, like, because I think my initial thought, and this is my journey, my initial thought was like, I can't tell people that I cry when they're late because it makes me look really needy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And and then I realized like I can't like wish this away. I can't like suddenly wake up one day and make it not be that way. So I have to start just being real with people and starting. The only way that we can really like come together is by me, and that's this is the feminine journey is just telling the truth every time. Like I do cry when someone's late. So what am I supposed to do with that? Just I have to speak it, especially in intimate situations. Now, have I stopped crying when people are late with just like acquaintances and friends? Absolutely. I've done a lot of work to like change my lifestyle to understand this is not personal. But when it comes to like intimate situations, it's a whole different story. So that's kind of a bit there.
Talk to me about what it means from a self-worth perspective when you allow people to continue to be late.
Hmm. Well, it just means very simply that I don't believe my needs are as important as theirs. I'm not as I'm not as deserving of respect as they are. Like it's an automatic like uh power dynamic issue where automatically without trying to you're pedestalizing other people. Um so because you're not allowing like your needs to be heard. So I think that's a big one, to just explain to people the value and the importance. And if they want to honor it, awesome. And if they don't, then that's very clear as well.
Hmm.
Hmm. What are you thinking about with all this?
Oh, I've got 1,001 things that are rolling through my head right now.
Love it.
um, because like, and to be clear, I don't have issues with the dishwasher, but to I do share the time thing. I like
Yeah, yeah.
being on time is like I don't want to say it's a trigger, but like a lack of respect for honoring people's time when it comes to what they say they're going to do. I'm going to be out.
Hmm.
I'm leaving at 5:30. I will show up at 6.
Yeah,
Like it is the quickest way to get me to not want to have a relationship with a person.
yeah,
Like I'm
yeah.
not reason like I've had plenty of people, and this is where I'm gonna go with the dishwasher thing. I've had plenty of people be like, "You're making a big deal out of this, and it's not a big deal."
Mm,
And it's like, no, motherfucker, it is to me.
totally, it is to me.
And so like, when I think about the dishwasher thing, like, somebody goes, "Well, it's not a big deal. Like, why do you care?" And it's like, you don't. I can explain it to you, but it actually doesn't matter because this is something that I need to
Yeah,
feel secure. And we can talk about like maybe it's wounded, maybe you could grow and all this other stuff. That's a future state. The current
yeah,
state right now is like if you're not going to meet me where I'm at right now,
right,
then we don't have much more to talk about.
right, right.
Then there's a lot to say with like, well, they should be willing to grow. Yeah, 100%. And you need to meet them where they're at right now. And if you're not going to do that,
Totally,
what more is there to say?
totally. It's beautiful.
And I've struggled with that myself of like getting halfway done with a mission that I've been handed by, a woman. My wife, my mother, my bosses, the majority of my supervisors and bosses have been female in my life. Um, but getting halfway done and they're like, no, 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 I don't want that. And it's like, God damn it. Like at this point, let me finish just so that I can finish the thing and feel good about it. Um,
Oh man, that must be really hard.
I mean, like I've said, like you and I have talked offline before, like I have my wounds too.
For sure.
And but from my perspective, like there's something that's really deep inside of me that's like, no, I want a mission. I don't want happiness.
Yeah,
I want purpose.
yeah.
Like, what is my purpose? You know, and what is the thing that I can look at and go, this is the thing where I can be better than anyone else. This is the thing where
Mm,
I am honored in this. And it goes, there's a book called Wild at Heart where he says, like, deep in his
mm,
heart every man longs for an adventure to live, a battle to fight, and a beauty to rescue. And like
mm.
I read that, and like I'm gonna need a minute. like like
Yeah.
and being told, like, and you think about, like, and I've said that to some young men that I mentor. I was like, what's your adventure to live? What's the battle that you want to fight? Who's the beauty you want to rescue? And like I've never not gotten an answer.
Ugh,
like
my
like
heart.
they might think
Yeah.
about it and they're like, oh, well, it's not realistic, but like they will premise it, they'll work around, but like we always end up at an answer, and it's never what I expect. And it's almost
Mm,
never what they're doing.
mm,
So like but then you flip that on its head, and kind of going back to your discussion on Soviet masculinity. I mean, I don't have much experience with Soviets, being Midwestern white bread in America. Um, but like I think about just my own upbringing and being like, well, you shouldn't want a beauty to rescue. You should want a beauty to rescue herself.
mm.
Well, then what do I do?
Totally.
Like, what's my role then? And like, it's not. I'm not saying that it can't change, but I am saying that if you're going to take that away, something has to fill the void. And you know what fills the void in my mind? It's
Mm,
video games, because
mm,
there's always a clear mission and objective, and then achievements unlocked when you get it. Like, and that was done on purpose. Like, Dopamine Labs is like the most supervillain name for a company ever, and yet it exists. So like,
mm. Hate
stop
that.
and think about like what all these things are. Like, it's
Yeah.
literally providing purpose for those boys.
Faux purpose. Faux purpose.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, but it feels real to
Simulated
them.
purpose.
Exactly.
Simulated purpose. Yeah.
It's simulated
Which,
masculinity. Jack Donovan talks about that a lot in his book The Way of Men, where he talks about simulated masculinity.
yeah,
Like sports, men's allegiance to sports is simulated masculinity. It's
totally.
enjoying watching other men do masculine things.
Totally.
Same with porn.
Same with porn. It's my heart hurts over that. Because I just love watching these old epic, like, films talking about the 1300s and the 1400s and men on horseback, and like, it's just it's so epic, and you're literally talking about a beauty to rescue, an adventure to live. It's like all kind of like, in my mind, like Braveheart and all these Rob Roy and all these beautiful films. And
Oh, Rob Roy.
I love Rob Roy. Do you like that movie?
Oh God, yes.
Okay, great.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
it's just
I love that movie.
amazing.
It's a great film.
The scene at
Most
the
people
end where he
haven't heard of
grabs
it.
the rapier and cleaves the guy in half, like I could just watch that on repeat because it's such like he has every reason to give up at this point,
Yeah.
and he doesn't. Like,
And he's so gentle with his wife and his
mhm.
children, which is what I mean. I mean, to be honest, I know this is not a comparison, but like my mind works in these ways of like cultural comparisons. I watched the McGregor documentary, and I really found myself just drawn to the authenticity of Conor McGregor. And what I realized and why Conor McGregor is so magnetic as a person is because he's he's a killer, right? He's a killer. He's battling men, he's competing, he's all that. But when he's with his girlfriend and their children, he's gentle, sweet, kind, loving, fun dad. And that's something that we don't really have a lot of examples of. So
Mm.
I really appreciated the visuals of that. How true it is or not, like what happens behind the scenes 24/7, I don't know. I watched a documentary, right? Like let's take this all with a grain of salt, but it was a great visual for sure.
I mean, but don't shoot the eagle out of the sky, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
unimportant if that's the complete and honest, unadulterated truth. If the
Sure.
myth is useful,
Great point, Dylan. Great
like
great fucking point, cuz I didn't even want to say that second part. Like I didn't even want to say it, but I feel like in the culture of the moment, sometimes I feel like a push to say things like that, like to
totally.
qualify stuff that I say.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
so much of it is about like let's deconstruct this. Like,
Right.
well, that's fine, but at some point, do we build something back in its place? I mean,
Yeah.
and again, kind of going back to Jack Donovan's work where he talks about like a sky without eagles, like
Yeah.
that's a thing. Like, who do you look up to? And is it really important? And I've had this debate with a friend of mine, who is multiracial, and about Alexander Hamilton, right?
Okay.
And like, I really like the play. The musical. I love it. My kids know every flippin' line of it and can sing all the songs. I have learned many of the songs so I can sing it with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I like it.
Yeah.
And he hates it. And he hates it
Mm.
because it doesn't tell the whole story about like the idea
Mm.
that Alexander Hamilton was a slave owner and worked in a slave auction house. Like that was left out, and because of that, he can't like it because it makes Alexander Hamilton look good, and Alexander Hamilton has to look
Oh,
bad because he was clearly evil. Blah blah blah. And I'm like,
totally.
we come to the forward present, like when climate change starts killing large sections of humanity, like are we going to look back at the person 20 years ago who was driving a truck and be like, you were
Totally.
terrible? It was like, no, I was just doing what everyone else at the time was like.
100%.
And so,
100%.
you know
100%.
do we have to rip Alexander Hamilton down, or can we look at this man who had every reason to fail? Parents died when he was young, immigrated from the Caribbean to New York, had no education, no pedigree, no nothing, was praying for a war so that he could make his mark on the world, and then
Yeah.
became like the financial system of the globe is his financial system.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Yeah.
fucking incredible. And they're like, well, he
Totally.
cheated on his wife. And it was like, dude, all the founding fathers cheated on their wives.
Everybody cheated on their wives back then.
Like,
Yes.
like, there's a documentary called the Hero of Two Worlds about the Marquis de Lafayette, and about how
Mm-hmm.
like he was so devoted to his wife he didn't want to have a mistress, but he had to
Mm.
take a mistress because that was what all the men did at the time. So he would have lost huge amounts of status. So his wife was
Uh,
like, you need this. And he was like, but I don't want it. Like, you're enough for me. And she was like, no, like,
Oh
Like
my
you,
God, I'm
this is
dying.
part of like his father-in-law sits him down and has a conversation with him
Yeah,
about it, and
how
it just
funny.
it's one of those things of
Mm,
like, again, the Marquis de Lafayette, like the United States exists because that man existed,
totally.
because of who he
Wow.
was, because he just decided that he had had enough with family life and all the pressures of being part of the French aristocracy, and literally jumped on a pirate boat and came to America to seeking adventure again with the whole like adventure to live.
Adventure thing, sure.
And then at the Battle of Yorktown, at the last battle of the Revolutionary War, you know, two out of every three soldiers was French because he
Oh
brought
my
them.
God. Yeah.
Like, so
Wow.
when I look at this, we're like, this is a man who lived this amazing adventure. He has a beautiful love story. He's got,
Yeah.
all the stuff. Like, do I need to find reasons to destroy his reputation if his myth is enough for me to look at it and go, I'm a better man because I want to be like the Marquis de Lafayette or Alexander Hamilton or
Beautiful.
Abraham Lincoln or whoever?
Whoever. I think you're so spot on. I think you're so spot on. And we have to qualify the times that these people were living in. Like what was happening during the times? What was the culture of the moment? Like we are so yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Winston Churchill's a great example of that as well. All the great that he did. Obviously there was some racism there, right? So,
And he was a belligerent alcoholic.
great. And then there was that.
Yeah,
And
right.
and he loved his wife, and he was a belligerent alcoholic.
Totally.
Whoa, contrast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and guided, like in his whole thing, like his speech, and we will fight them on the beaches. Like
yep,
when I was in college, I used to listen to that speech on repeat,
yeah,
like
yeah.
every day when I was having a bad day. Like here's this dead man, like inspiring me to go to class.
Dude, I love it. It's so fascinating. I've been thinking about a lot about him and his relationship, his Clementine. It's interesting, right? Like he talks about how people ask interviewers had asked him a couple of different times, right? Like, what's the key to your success? And he'll always answer, I got married. I love my wife. I don't chase women. Therefore, all my energy is not wasted on chasing women. Like, that's it. I love my wife. And so it's interesting how they have this like very loving, deep relationship, but didn't one of their kids commit suicide? They had like a whole bunch of like weirdness going on with their kids. Like clearly they might not have the parenting wasn't so good. So I'm not sure what was going on there.
Totally. I mean, no one's gonna be
Yeah.
perfect though.
No, no way.
Like you could admire somebody who
Yeah.
does amazing things in one section of their life and not be
Yeah.
like, well, but they were bad parents. Well, like, okay, well, maybe that's a lesson to take forward. But man,
Totally.
if ever I was handed leadership in a war situation, I pray to whatever gods might be listening that I can have the spine of Winston Churchill.
Oh my God.
Right?
Right? Right?
It's the whole thing of like yeah, masculinity's toxic right until you fucking need it.
Totally. Absolutely. We never we never think about masculinity until something breaks.
Totally. After the Dobbs case and the Supreme Court striking down Roe v. Wade,
Mm,
um, I had a lot of female friends where like they wanted to go to marches and stuff, and I was like,
mm,
have fun. And she's,
yeah.
they would, and I had a number of them be like, well, I need your support. And it was like, but
Mm,
last week you were telling me you needed me like a bicycle, like a fish needs a bicycle. Like last week you were
totally.
telling me that everything I can do, you can do just as well, if not better. Last
Totally.
week you were telling me that men were obsolete. So go
Totally.
get them, Tiger. And they're
Totally.
like, well, but this is your own self-interest. And it's like, is it though? I was told I don't get an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Those were great things to say to me when you thought you were in power and you wanted to be a hurt person hurting people. But now that you need
Yeah.
me, I'm supposed to just be the better person. Like,
Totally.
and to be fair, I probably should. I probably should be the better person. But like, your strategy was very, very poor because you made some bad
Yeah.
assumptions.
Mm, it's
You
really
know,
yeah.
it's why the left in this country, I don't think that there is a left wing in the United States. Like we just don't. We have nobody who's arguing for full nationalization of resources, so we don't have left wing, right? We have
Mm,
people who are like, maybe we shouldn't die of medical bankruptcy. Like that's our left wing. Like that's a center right position in the rest of the world.
mm,
And but I think the reason for that is that the left threw out all their men.
yeah. Totally.
Like if you go back to like I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Like you look at like the Bayview massacre. Like, what was that? It was men who were like literally shutting down steel mills because they were like, no more poverty wages. Like, we're unionizing and you're going to respect us.
Yeah.
And then the Wisconsin governor calling out the National Guard to mow them down. And then of course what was going on at the time, like this is actually an interesting piece of Milwaukee history. The women were coming down with lunch for the men who were on the picket line.
Mm.
So the National Guard showed up at lunchtime while the women were like, "Hey, honey," like giving him a hug and handing him a sandwich and all this other stuff. And that's when they
Yeah.
opened fire. So the men were actually standing with their back to the wall in front of the gate, and their women were in front of them giving them food when the National Guard.
Oh
So
wow.
the first like people to drop were their wives,
Wow.
and then they were like, it was on, and they charged the National Guard. Like
Wow.
the National Guard had guns and they didn't, and but they had sledgehammers and they just shot their wife, and like it turned into a gigantic melee.
Wow.
Like so, like there's a display of masculinity that would be on the left
Wait,
side of the political spectrum, but it's not there anymore.
how did that end? Like how did that
Horribly.
end? Oh,
The city
okay.
the city of Bayview ended up being dissolved and absorbed by the city of Milwaukee because
Okay.
like nobody like the mayor, everything, it all collapsed.
Wow.
Milwaukee then hired, like literally, Milwaukee had socialist mayors for like the next 50 years as a result of that. Um,
Wow.
like Bayview is no longer a city; it's a neighborhood in Milwaukee now.
Right. 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 Oh wow.
So, but I mean, it was that lead up. Like the Bayview massacre was
Yeah.
one of the reasons that when the coal strike went on, a couple of years later, Theodore Roosevelt got involved in the coal strike specifically because Bayview happened,
Hmm.
and he didn't want that
Hmm.
to happen to the coal miners.
Interesting.
So I mean, but it's an example of that, of like you look forward, like a lot of the unionization efforts that were happening in the 1950s, they were literally like taking over automobile factories, building catapults, and launching door hinges at the police. Like that's the type of thing that gets things done. What's the call? The women are like, our children are starving, and the men are like, well, fuck, we'll go do something about it, and then we end up with
Totally.
that. Now, it doesn't matter which way you say. Like a lot of that's happening on the right side of the political spectrum right now, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it
but
is.
the left's response is to play a guitar in the Capitol.
100%. And I am so with you on I'm so on board with this. Like the masculine is a far greater do being than the feminine. The masculine is amazing at getting shit done. And I think to just bring everything that you just shared into kind of a modern context and like what's happening with women and kind of maybe even a question I have for you. Like I love how much fulfillment and purpose men find in being useful and being needed and like living out their mission and doing all of these things, right? As women, especially now in 2023, I know that the narrative has been like you've got to take care of yourself, like you can't like rely on a man. You've got to be able to handle it. So even like I'm speaking from like I'm single right now. Like I want to be in a partnership. I want to get married. I want to have a family. But like I don't really have any gaps in my life, right? I don't have a financial gap. Like I can take care of myself, right? I have to right now as a single person. I have I'm 33 now. I have my visions, I have my creativity, I have my friendship, I have like my life kind of sorted. And I know that something Alison Armstrong talks about and other kind of like teachers of polarity talk about is how men will not men will not like find a beauty unless they can find gaps in her life that they can fill.
Hmm.
And this is something that is like taught by, because back in the day you're thinking about the wives
Hmm.
coming to like bring the sandwiches to the men, right? Like the men had very clear roles in the lives of these women. They're rescuing the beauty. So like I'm the beauty, I want to be rescued, but what does it mean to be rescued? Like I don't need to be rescued financially. I don't need to be rescued, I don't know, in any other way, right? And so but I want to be rescued. So like in this like modern age, like how does that even work? It's such an
Hmm.
interesting question.
Yeah, and it's a question that makes me deeply uncomfortable. Um,
Yeah.
the reason it makes me deeply uncomfortable is that like I've asked that question and been like shit on so severely by women.
Really?
Oh God, yeah. Like one of the questions I
Oh.
asked was like, "What's my role in a woman's life?" And they were like, "To support her." How do I support her?
Oh.
By staying out of her way.
Oh, yikes. My heart breaks with that.
Like, can I think about this? So, like, my wife, we came back to the United States, so she could go to grad school, and
Yeah.
and we wanted to have kids. Like, but grad school was first. Kids were a secondary concern. She'll tell you now that that's not the case, but that was in fact the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Grad school took a precedent above everything because we found the grad school, and then we hoped I could find a job so we
Yeah.
could live together.
Yep.
Um, and so like that was a big thing when I got the job in Flagstaff and she got offered a bucket of cash. Like we literally celebrated like, oh my God, we're gonna be parents. Like, that was a thing. Um, and I had been told for so long that like the role of a good man is to support his wife and help her foster her own career and not need to be taken care of by her, right?
Mm.
So I really tried to do that, and
Mm.
she went and got her master's degree and then moved on to getting her PhD, and I supported her through that even when she didn't want to continue with her PhD. I was like, no, like you need to continue. You
Mm.
need this. You need this sense of validation
Mm.
for all these different reasons. And she eventually, of course, got the PhD. But I've always been quick to like point out that like she historically has made more money than me.
Mm.
Still does. We've had 1 year where she made more money than me, or where I made more money than she did. 1 year
Mm.
since she joined the corporate world. Because when I got her
Mm.
the job, in utilities, she was making 10 grand more than me, and
Mm.
still makes more than I do. Not really a problem, but like no one gives a shit. Like this is the thing is that I've been told my whole life that like this is what you should do. And so when I mention it, like everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's nice," and then moves on. And it's like, "Wait, hold on, but like I'm what you feminists all said you wanted.
Mm.
Like why am I not getting like why am I not getting honored for this?" And people would say, "Well, oh, you're so fragile, you want to be honored." And it was like, "Yes, yes, I wanted to achieve the cookie. You gave me a mission, I went and accomplished it. Now give me the
Mm.
fucking cookie." Like
Mm. Mm.
why can I not have that? And the whole thing is like, well, you don't deserve it. Like that was just her due
Oh,
for years of oppression. And I'm like, I had nothing to
yikes.
do with that.
Right.
So like I feel
Mm.
caught with that. That's why this is deeply uncomfortable for me because like how do I reconcile those positions? And I don't know. And I'm not asking you to figure it out.
Yeah.
This is more rhetorical than anything else.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really amazing. Like, listen to that. Like, whoa. Like, that's what women have been told they wanted for decades now. But I don't think that's actually what women want. Like, I think that like I just don't. I think every woman that I've spoken to recently, and a couple of women that I've known that like were uber feminists a couple years ago, dude, I've received some phone calls lately that literally go like this: "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, and I know I was a little like annoyed at some of the things you were talking about a few years ago, but I think I, I think I just want a man to take care of me.
Yeah.
I've come to that, and I'm like, thank you for the call. It's like
Thank you for the
it's
call, but you
like
pushed everyone and you pushed them all away. So now I don't know what to do with you.
it's it's just it's just so funny. It's so real, and I'm telling you right now, like that, like my greatest fear too is like I feel like I don't have enough gaps or something.
So I will
Yeah,
address that because I actually think that the beauty to rescue thing,
yeah,
um, as much as I hate to say that any part of that masculinity is outdated, women in the modern context, women don't need to be rescued for all the reasons you've listed.
right,
You know,
right.
so what like and why do we want to rescue the beauty in the first place? Like let's actually
Good
answer that
question.
question because I think
It's
that
a great
that will
question.
relate. Well, because then she'll love me. Then she'll desire me because then I've done something worthy of her love.
Mm,
Like like to look at it and be like, I slew the dragon for you. Your beauty it
Mm.
inspired me to stand on the line, and when I was cold at night in the dark and the fucking rain, your love kept me going.
You are
And
Helen of Troy.
the face that launched 1,000 ships, because yeah, I'm Helen of Troy. We could do an entire episode of my thoughts on Helen of Troy. Um, um, but
Uh,
but so like, how do you translate that then to the modern context? And it's like,
mm,
here's the first thought that goes through my head. Like a man would talk to a tree if it talked to him first. Like when, and this will take me a second to get there, so just bear with me.
yeah.
Um, like catcalling. Have you ever watched the experiments where like women, particularly feminist women, will go out and they'll try to catcall men to make them feel like they feel, and it like always backfires, and all the guys are like, "Oh my god, thank you." They're like, "Hey, hot
Totally.
stuff."
I have seen that.
It
I
was
have
like, and the
seen
guy's
that.
like, "Me?
Oh, me?
Oh god,
Me?
hi,
Totally.
amazing!" And like that guy's now going to think about that for the rest of his life. He's like, this one
Totally.
day in 2013, this woman catcalled me, and I have been trying to be worthy of more catcalling my whole life, and I just don't know what I like how. And part of that is how desexualized men are,
Yeah.
and how under like we don't get touched, we don't get hugged, we don't get looked
Yeah.
at, we don't get desired. Like I think that's the key. Like I don't think men necessarily want to rescue women anymore. I think they want to be desired by a woman.
Yeah.
Like they want her to want something,
Yeah.
and they want that something sometimes to be them. Like how like how many men are just sitting there and be like, want me,
Totally.
like crave me, like and I could already hear in my head, because I obviously I give rent free space in my mind to a lot of women who have hurt me over the years, where they're like, you have no right to demand that, you have no right to expect that, it'll be something worth it. And this is like right
Mm.
where you slide right into the red pill. We're like, well, you can't fix your
Mm.
face, and I've struggled with this
Mm.
too. Like I'm aware of how I look.
Mm.
Like so when I don't get the attention, it's real easy to look in the mirror and be like, that's why.
Mm.
Like I'm never going to be worthy of this. And then you add on top of that social media, and you add on top of that, just look at the statistics that come out of any dating app. You
Totally.
know,
It's
like
so bad.
it all that is just more and more confirmation that that is the way things are, whether right or wrong. And as has been pointed out by Chris Willx on Modern Wisdom, like there's stated preferences and there's revealed preferences. Men don't care about the stated preferences; they want the revealed preferences. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that that's something that men are very in tune with, of what the revealed preferences are.
Mm.
So, like, I guess that'd be my answer to your question. I don't know if I actually even hit into the right area of the field here, but like, that's the thing. That's the thing that I'm missing in my life.
Mm.
Is like,
Mm.
I want her to have wants. I want her to desire things. I want to know what my mission
Totally.
is.
Totally. I think that's such an important part. Yeah, I heard this great quote that like if you withhold your truth to a man, then you're essentially cock blocking his hero's journey. And that really
Yeah.
resonates on many, many, many levels, right? And sometimes like women try to imagine that men are mind readers, right?
Yeah.
And this happens all the time. And I think like, well, why doesn't he touch me gently? Why doesn't he understand my body? Like, why doesn't he text me a few hours before I get home to like warm me up before like we go out to dinner tonight? Why doesn't he do all the things that like women know? These are just like obvious. Like this is how you attract a woman, right? This is how you get a woman excited. Um, but that's just not. I don't think men know these things off the bat. Like I just don't
Mm.
think they know these things, and they're all different for each woman too. And I think, you know, I just think that like women have such a hard time communicating um, what it is they really want. So I think that's a part of it too.
So I'm gonna push back on that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think it's that men don't know to do
Okay.
that. I think
Okay.
it's been beaten out of them.
Mm.
Like, and I think about my own. And granted, I've been on the market for a while.
Yeah.
Um, but like, how many times have I texted a woman and be like, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to tonight, and this is great," and blah blah blah. and then I get radio silence.
Hmm.
Like, did she like it? And like, this has actually happened to me where I've done that, where it's like, hey, I'm excited about dinner tonight. I was thinking though, like after dinner, maybe we can walk down by the lake. Like, Lake Michigan's
Hmm.
really cool. And like, maybe we can watch a sunset or something like that. And only to find out that then she cancels on me. It's like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? And then I find out from her friend later, like, oh, well, you really creeped her out. Like, you came off so clingy. And it was like, I was excited.
Totally.
So then what do I do with the
Totally.
next one? Like, I'm supposed to be aloof? Oh, he's emotionally
Totally.
unavailable. Like, God damn it. which way do I go? So like
Yeah.
if I guess my statement would be like if that's what you want, say that. Like, hey, I really, if it comes up for you, like I want you to text me.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. No, it's really good. Even in the beginning, I think this is one of my favorite things Alison Armstrong talks about. It's like we hedge bets. We hedge bets because what if we mess up and this is the right person and da da da. And she's always like, "There's no such thing as messing up if this is the right person." So like you may
Totally.
as well just like speak your truth from the beginning, even from the first second date. It's like you don't have to go into like the emotional history of your life, but you can speak your needs right away. And I think that's big. So I love that.
Yeah, I have thought a lot recently about like what it's like to date right now. And like what would happen if I was back on the dating market, what would I do?
Yeah.
And because I mean I've got a lot of young men that I'm mentoring where they're like,
Yeah.
what would you do? And I guess the advice I've been giving them is like be be yourself but at a 12 on the first date. Like be like and one of the guys I mentor was like, Dylan, we all know you and you're very intense. Like would you want to do that? I'm like, if she's not attracted to my intensity, like better she find out on date 1 than like on date 3 or in the middle of sex or something like that.
Totally.
Could you imagine that like, oh, this guy's pretty even keel, and then like you're hit with this intensity like out of the fucking blue. um
Totally.
that I don't think that would be kind for people.
I
And
think
it's
it's
the same thing
great
for her of
advice.
like, if she's putting on a show, I'm gonna pick that up real quick.
Totally.
Like whereas she comes in and she's like, some people don't like me because I'm a woman and some people don't like me because I'm a bitch, and I'm hoping you like me for the same reasons. And I'm like, I'm in. Like
Nice.
I
Nice.
want to know so much more right now.
Nice. Oh, I love this. Oh my gosh, we went all over the place today. I loved it.
Totally. Totally. All right, well, I think we can leave it
Let's
there.
let's leave it there. It's
All
perfect.
right. Everyone, thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.